Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Keith with the Leaders Lyceum. Another week of Weekly Thought Fuel. Glad to have Karl Kuhnert back with us as we're talking through the map. If you don't know about this, go to themapthebook.com and pick yourself up a copy. Hey, we're talking through this week, we're talking through a little bit more in depth some things that we talked about in the chapter on level 3. And one of the things that is true about people who are at level 3 is that they are outside sourced. In other words, things outside of themselves are doing more to define who they are.
Right.
In the book, you talked about there are two primary ways to be outside sourced, through relationships and through a role.
Right.
And we both have traditional definitions for that, right? We have relationships are like the people we hang out with.
Right.
And the role is like the thing we do at work or at home, like we're a parent or we're a manager or we're an accountant.
Right. So I'm a manager, and so I lead as if I'm a manager, and so I think about my role more than who I am in that role. Right.
Yeah.
I am the manager.
Yeah. And
so that's how I define myself.
Right. As opposed to being a person who happens to manage others, which is there's a self there. Okay. Here's where we want to go with this week. This definition of what can define us is very broad, right? Sometimes our skill sets or our intelligence can define us. Sometimes our athleticism could define us. Our ethnicity could define us. I've even heard people talking about their personalities defining them from the outside in, as though being a high D on the disc or being an ENTJ on the Myers-Briggs is like this thing outside of them. Well, it makes me act that way or makes me think that.
I had a vice president in my university have a sign on his desk that says ESTJ spoken here.
Yeah, I love that. That's perfect. As though it was this thing beyond him. Okay, all right. We debated, folks, whether or not to even go here today, right? But one of the other things that can define us is our politics. And we can be identified, and you're starting to hear this phrase thrown around the news about this is identity politics.
Right.
What's that phrase mean to you?
Well, that means, to me, it means that this is a way to divide us.
Oh gosh, well, okay, you're going deep right out of the gates.
It's a way to separate us. It's a way to separate the Republicans from the Democrats. It's a way to separate us, whites versus blacks. It's a way to separate us.
So what's it mean to be, what's identity politics mean to you? Because
is that I essentially get my marching orders from the Republican or Democrat Party.
Yeah. And you know what? Being identified, there's even appropriate times in our life, mainly through our 20s, there are so many things that define us, and it's an important part of growing up.
It absolutely is.
But you and I have talked a little bit about over-identification is where it starts to become a problem. When I am over-identified with a group, or if I even hear an opposing view, if I feel like that outside source is being threatened in any way, I am going to lose my identity. That becomes problematic.
Right.
And now I've got to defend that in a way that it is divisive. It doesn't bring us together, it divides us.
It's discomfort, right? You have a lot of discomfort when you're hearing an opposing view.
Yeah. And do you know what? There are so many things that we can do to get our identity. We find news sources, we hang out with people who are maybe in agreement with us, where we don't get challenged or we don't get pushed in some way. But Karl, you and I were talking about, I mean, this is a week where we're maybe asking you to do something that may seem scary.
Yeah.
But what would it be like this week to find someone who doesn't see things the way you do, not in order to have a debate with them to figure out who's right and who's wrong,
but to listen to them.
But to listen to them.
And see if you can actually put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, and what would that do for your own understanding of you if you were to take that step? Would you know, because of that, who you were more? Because that is what moving in the direction of level 4 looks like. So I feel like it's a big ask for this week, but would you guys do that? Would you maybe consider finding somebody?
Hey, growth isn't easy.
Growth isn't easy. Listen well.